I'm on my hotspot, so I don't know what happened all of a sudden.
Okay. Well,
But I just wanted to know that I am here.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Lisa. All right, so let's get started, shall we? Let's see if we can do actual slideshow. I want the other way though. All right, we'll just use this. Okay, so we're going to get started here. Sorry for all those technical glitches. We've got plenty of time now to go through stuff. So hopefully this is short-term issue here. Okay, so I hope you guys can get into your book so that you can kind of go along, read the chapter. It will make all of this make a lot more sense if you can go ahead and do that. So we've got several objectives that we're going to cover in our first chapter here. We're going to look at laws. I will tell you, this first chapter is dry. Okay, you're not going to do any math yet, and I know that's why you guys are all here, because you like working with numbers. Unfortunately, in this chapter, we're working with words. But we do need to have kind of a framework of what all the laws and regulations are with regard to the payroll function. Now, there are a lot of laws. Obviously, this is a very sensitive area. People like it when their paychecks are correct, and they don't like it when their paychecks are wrong, of course, unless it's in their favor. But it's a very highly regulated area. So we do need to go through and look at the various laws that employers have to follow when they engage in payroll functions. So that's what we're going to do for the most part in this chapter. We're going to look at some of the record keeping requirements as well that are part of those laws. We're also going to look at the Human Resources Department and how the Human Resources Department works with the Payroll Department. Now, those are two separate departments in organizations. They have separate functions, but they work very, very closely together. Payroll also works very closely with the accounting department. So payroll, when you're working in a payroll department, you get to know a lot of people in other departments. And of course, you've got interaction with employees as well. So maybe in addition to just accounting department and human resources department, you probably get to know employees in all sorts of different departments. So it's a really good fit for individuals who like to socialize, who like to have that human interaction on a regular basis, because you do tend to get a lot of it in payroll. But we're going to focus mainly in this chapter, we're going to focus on that relationship with the Human Resources Department. We do talk more about accounting, but that's toward the end of the class. In the last chapter, we're going to focus on really that accounting function and how payroll helps to support the accounting function. We're going to talk about personnel records that are used, both those, personnel records that are used when an employee is first hired, as well as records that are then kept for essentially the life of the employee, as long as they are employees of the organization. So we're going to take a look at those. We are going to spend quite a bit of time focusing on this payroll register and the employee earnings record. These are two very important spreadsheets. I mean, they end up being, they're spreadsheets, but they're two very important records that are used by payroll, and they are used in many, many different ways. So I'm gonna go through and introduce you to those. These particular records, you're gonna see these pop up in your continuing payroll, what do they call it? You've got I can't remember what the terminology is that they use in the textbook, but you've got a project that is continuous throughout the semester. So it's kind of, it adds upon itself. And in every one of those projects, you're going to use the register and the employee earnings record. Okay, so I'll give you a tour of what those are and give you some tips on how to distinguish between them, because, you know, the names of them are kind of a little similar. It's easy to get those two mixed up. Okay, so that is what we are looking at in this chapter. Let me see if I can't. There we go. That's better. All right. Actually, you know what I want to do? I want to start out with, this is in your course content under chapter 1. So you can watch it as well on your own time, but I thought this might be a good way to get you introduced. It's a video about a payroll department. So let me get that queued up here. Whoops. Contents, chapter 1. You can see I've got a lot of things here in this resources tab. This one, just the day in the life of the payroll department. I am going to. Sorry, folks out there, I need to get this transferred over to the other screen. I'll do it that way.
Our job here in payroll is to pay all Adams County employees. It's a very daunting task. It really is our job to be the last person to check your paycheck to make sure it's accurate.
Some months are more difficult than others, depending on what kind of projects we have going on, whether it's the audit time, W-2 time. Those months are pretty challenging. W-4s, direct deposits, just their new hire information in general to input. Then we'll have the retros throughout the month, the termination paperwork to pay attention to. Each day is something different.
We have to make sure that you're taxed properly. We have garnishments, levies, child supports that come out. And I think a lot of people do have the misconception that, you know, we only have a monthly payroll, so what do we do the rest of the month? And they don't realize that we have a ton of things to do all month long. We have about 1,900 employees, and last year we paid about $113 million in gross wages and about $30 million in taxes. So our number one goal is the accuracy of the paychecks, because money is very personal to everyone. And so it's very important to us to get everyone paid accurately.
I feel like we make a huge impact on the employees just because of the fact that they are working to pay their bills and to have fun in life. So I feel like if we don't do our job well and accurately, that will impact them. People's money is important to them, and I want to make sure that we pay them correctly. When we have a quiet payday, that's when it's probably the most rewarding, because then we know that there's no questions on the checks. It's not just the push of a button to push a check through the system. It takes a lot of work in prepping and processing. It's not just cut me a check and it's done. It's a process.
Process of it, I guess, is giving ourselves enough time to do those checks and rechecks and triple checks and everything, just to be sure we have it correct when we do hit that button. In payroll, there really is no room for error. It's a lot of people and a lot of little details to check in such a small window. And during payroll week, we want our focus to be that we're getting all those checks and things looked at before you get your check.
We catch a lot of the little things to have that human eye looking at it, it catches any errors that technology may not.
And when you have something that just clicks and just works and everything kind of flows through how it's supposed to, it's the most amazing feeling, because if you're off, goodness, by 2 pennies, those 2 pennies can give you a headache for hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, even a day sometimes. So when things work, it makes life a lot easier.
If you like numbers, it's a lot about the numbers, but what's different for us is it's a lot about the people and the employees, and it's about helping them, and that's what makes us a little bit different. It really takes all of us to get it all done. Everyone is on the same page as far as the importance of getting the payroll out.
It's been extremely nice coming to work with a team like them.
The most rewarding is the connections that we have, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
When you get those people that say thanks for paying me, that always makes it more fun, a little bit more rewarding.
Okay, so just a little.
Building your online business?
Okay, hopefully everybody out there was able to hear that. Again, that's there in your Blackboard course, so you can go ahead and you're welcome to watch that. Just kind of a little glimpse of what it looks like. Now, I am curious, has anybody, so who has received a paycheck? Ben? Rohan? Okay, so several of you have received paychecks in the past. Are you aware of all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes to get those paychecks to you? A little bit? Yeah, so Tina is. So a lot goes on, obviously, behind the scenes to get those paychecks to you. And as they mentioned in the video, it's not just a matter of calculating it and spitting out a paycheck. There are all sorts of other things that have to be done in addition to paying employees as well. Like I said, it's a very highly regulated area, and so as a result of that, there are lots of forms that need to be filled out, lots of reports that need to be submitted. Payroll is also a highly deadline-driven profession. So not only do you have to make sure you pay the employees on time, they get a little annoyed if you don't do that, and you can get into some big trouble if that doesn't happen, but you also have very strict deadlines with regard to depositing taxes that have been withheld, so Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes, federal income taxes, state income taxes. Also, there are other types of deductions, and we're going to go through all of these things through the semester. You're going to become very familiar with all of them, and you'll know how to calculate them as well. And there are those other types of deductions, which they kind of mentioned briefly in the video. Health insurance. So if you work for an employer that offers health insurance, but the employee has to pay a portion of it, that's an amount that has to be withheld from paychecks, and then there's a deadline for payment of those premiums. Life insurance is another common benefit that employers will offer. So if any amount is being withheld, those amounts have to be remitted to the life insurance company. Garnishments, child support, tax levies, other types of debts for individuals who are in arrears with some of those debts. Oftentimes, the creditor will garnish wages so that they make sure that they get those amounts. And so those also, there are deadlines for all of that as well as reporting deadlines, not just with regard to making payments, but deadlines for submitting reports to both the federal government and to the state. So lots and lots of deadlines related to the payroll function. As they mentioned here. Now, as far as salaries go, let's see, did somebody Nope. As far as salaries go, the salaries actually have increased in recent years for payroll clerks and payroll managers. So average salary for payroll clerks, they mentioned 41,750. Of course, that's going to be dependent upon geographic region. Des Moines, Iowa happens to be as far as average prices, it's pretty average. So you've got places like, San Francisco and New York and Chicago that are extremely expensive. Their cost of living is extremely expensive. And then you've got more rural areas in all of the states where cost of living tends to be less expensive. The cost of living is going to be related, of course, to salaries. Des Moines, Iowa is right in the middle. It is the average. So, that's probably a pretty good indication for a beginning salary. We have contact with some recruiters here in the department, one of which I always have him, he comes and speaks in my accounting professionalism class. He specifically works within the accounting profession to place individuals into positions, accounting positions. Payroll has always been a very high demand area. So there traditionally been a lot of openings, and the beginning salaries are pretty close to $20 an hour right now, $20 to $22 an hour, maybe even inching up a little bit higher. And we're talking starting salaries. So $20 an hour is pretty close to that amount. So this is somebody, and I don't know that this is even taking into account prior experience or education level. For managers of payroll departments, you of course would expect to see a higher salary. The more your responsibility, the higher your salary is going to be. But the average, I would assume that's probably a starting salary as well, close to $80,000 a year. Now, it is a lot of responsibility. Not only are you, as a manager, not only are you in charge of responsible for all of the employees in that department, but you're responsible to make sure that the payroll gets completed accurately. And of course, if there's any issue, everybody comes to you to solve any problems. The American Payroll Association is a professional organization of payroll professionals. I think I put a link that I'm going to also show you. Their website. Just American Payroll Association. Can't read that, so I don't know if I'm spelling it right. Might be .org. Yep, no, probably .org. Okay, make that a little bit bigger here. So like I said, it's a professional organization. They offer education, certification. They have two major certifications. The Fundamental Payroll Certificate, the FPC, which we offer the Payroll Certification Review course that you may end up taking as one of the electives in the program. It's a 2-credit course. That is geared toward providing information about that exam for individuals who are interested in possibly pursuing that exam. And then they've got, and that is for entry level payroll professionals. So people, and it's not required for working in the payroll industry, but it is, it's a certification that shows potential employers that you have that expertise and that you have gone that extra mile getting that certification. This organization offers, you would take an exam through this organization. So there's information here about the fundamental payroll certification. They offer courses too. You can see they're really quite expensive, but I've had students take several students actually take that payroll certification review course and then sit for the exam and they pass it. So not to discourage anybody from taking these, but they are like pretty expensive review courses. They can be. And you can study as well on your own. A lot of IRS publications cover much of the material that is presented on the exam. The other certification that they offer is called the Certified Payroll Professional. Now, like I said, the FPC, you don't need any prior experience in order to sit for that exam. So entry-level payroll professionals can sit for that. This is mainly for individuals. Here we go. Oh, okay. I must have gone the wrong place. Education certification. Oh, I was under the wrong. Certified Payroll Professional. This is for individuals who have experience in payroll. They've got some prior experience. Doesn't have to necessarily be a lot, 1 to 2 years, but if you're interested in pursuing a management type of position, this would be the certification that you would seek out. Again, not required. There are a lot of individuals out there working as payroll managers who do not have this certification. But it shows, again, potential employers that you have gone that extra mile and you've taken the extra effort to obtain that designation. And if you're interested in this, I'm happy to talk to you more about it. And I can show. I think I've got in somewhere in here. Maybe not. I'll put the link up to the payroll certificate, that American Payroll Association website. Okay. The American Payroll Association, in addition to helping to provide education and certification, it also offers opportunities for individuals to network with each other. They have conferences and meetings and stuff like that. They also maintain a code of ethics. So if you become a member of the organization, or if you get one of those certifications, this is the code of ethics that you have to abide by, but this is a code of ethics that everybody really should abide by, whether or not they're associated with that American Payroll Association. So, and we're going to go through the specific points of that code of ethics. Okay. So, all right, let me see if I can. Is that large enough for you guys to? No. Oh, maybe down here. Oh, too big. Oh, sorry. Let me do this then. Space things. That's what I want. You can see the whole screen. There we go. There. That's better. Okay. So the Code of Ethics has several different requirements to it. The first one, be mindful of the personal aspect of the payroll relationship between employer and employee. Ensure that harmony is maintained through constant concern for the payroll professional's fellow employees. So be nice to each other, be civil, be honest, be hardworking, all of that in order to try and maintain that harmony, and not, don't do things that encourage any types of disagreements. Obviously disagreements arise, but in solving those disagreements, make sure that you're mindful of the position that you hold and those relationships. Strive for perfect compliance, accuracy, and timeliness of all payroll activities. strive for. Obviously, nobody is perfect, but in addition to this profession being very deadline driven, it also is, how do I want to put this? It's very accuracy driven. Obviously, we want to make sure that everything is as accurate as possible the first time through, which means measuring twice, cutting once. Have you guys heard that expression before? Measure twice, cut once. Right. Before you actually execute, make sure, double check that everything is correct. What oftentimes will happen and this is true of any accounting profession, you don't just have one person processing. You saw in the video, there were a team of processors. And oftentimes what happens is one team member will process, another will check the work. So you've got, two sets of eyes at least checking to make sure that everything is accurate. Now, like I said, it says strive for perfect compliance. You know that Lexus commercial, the relentless pursuit of perfection. They don't say we're perfect, but they say we're constantly pursuing it. Same sort of concept here. Strive for perfection in not only the paycheck part of it, but also all the other activities that surround the payroll function, getting those reports done accurately and on time, making sure that any correspondence is answered in a timely manner. When you're working in payroll, you get correspondence from the IRS. They'll have questions about things, or if you were like a day late with submitting a deposit, you can expect to get a notice from the IRS. So making sure that all those notices are responded to in a timely manner as well. Keeping abreast of the state of the payroll art with regard to developments in payroll technologies. You can tell this language is a little bit fluffy, right? The payroll art. So making sure that you're up to date on any new developments in technology. This day and age, payroll, even if it's just a very small mom and pop operation, it's done using software. Larger corporations will develop their own software if they have an internal payroll department, or they may hire external companies for processing that, which they also develop their own software. But keeping up to date with all of that, all the changes. Be current with legislative developments and actions on the part of regulatory bodies insofar as they affect payroll. Now, this particular point has, payroll professionals have been very, very busy with this the last few years. There were a lot of changes that affected payroll during COVID. I don't know if you remember, there was one proposal that was passed that allowed individuals or allowed companies to permit employees to suspend their Social Security and Medicare payments. So it was a suspension of it, which meant eventually they'd have to pay it back. But that was something that payroll departments had to deal with. That was a big change, and it was a temporary change. Every year taxes change, right? The withholding rates change, the tables change. You have to keep up to date on all of that information. And believe me, sometimes it's not just an annual thing. They'll make changes throughout the year. So there are constant updates coming through, not only at the federal level, but at the state level as well. I don't know if you're aware, but the state of Iowa is in the process of changing their income taxes in quite a significant way. We are going to a flat tax in this state. After, I think it's starting in 2027, there will just be one income tax rate for the state of Iowa. So withholding is going to change as a result of that, and it's being grandfathered in. Well, it's being slowly phased in, I should say. And so every year, those state legislative changes to the tax code affect the payroll function, and the payroll professional has to be up to date on all of that as well. Number 5, maintain the absolute confidentiality of the payroll within the procedures of the employer. So not only is it deadline driven and accuracy is tantamount, confidentiality is also extremely important. This is very sensitive information, not only sensitive in that, you know, the payroll professional knows how much everybody makes, right? You know how much the president of the company makes if you're privy to all of that information. Not only that, you have addresses of all the employees, you've got social security numbers, you've got a lot of very personal, private information that if it were to fall into the wrong hands, could really damage one of the employees, right? So you have to maintain that confidentiality. Okay. I think I had mentioned on Tuesday there are a lot of frauds that have taken place in the past have involved payroll. So unscrupulous payroll employees, and there are lots of different ways to commit fraud within the payroll function. But this code of ethics is designed to try and guide individuals when they're, you know, making decisions about what they're going to do. Refrain from using association activities for one's personal self and or financial gain. So if you're a member of the American Payroll Association, you go to a conference that they're holding, don't go there just to go there to network, go there to gain information, don't go there to market yourself, right? So don't go there if maybe you own your own payroll company, don't go there to try and steal other payroll employees from other companies, right? So that's what they mean by that. Take as one's commitment the enhancement of one's professional abilities through the resources of the American Payroll Association. So keep educating yourself, keep learning new things, and of course it's the American Payroll Association, so they want you to do that through them, because then they can charge you for the classes. But you know, even this applies even if it's not through the American Payroll Association. You know, continue to educate yourself and update your skills. Support one's fellow payroll professionals both within and outside one's organization. So network, be of assistance to others, whether they work within your organization or another organization. Okay, so those are the 8 points of the Code of Ethics that the APA puts out. And there are, so in answer to the question that students always ask, yes, there are test questions about the Code of Ethics, because it is so important. I do make a point of mentioning that on the exams. Any questions about these points? I mean, it's common sense, right? It makes sense. But, you know, codes of ethics, of course, they're not laws. They're not things, it's not something that you're required to follow, but it is something to help guide you in making decisions, right? Guide employees in making decisions and making sure it's good, just good reminders, right? All right. So that's the Code of Ethics. Now we're going to start talking about some of these laws. And I will tell you, the ones that we really focus on in this class are the ones we talk about, or this list here. There are a lot of other laws that we're also going to look at. I don't expect you to know the details of all these other laws that affect, a lot of them affect human resources as well as payroll. But I do expect you to be able to distinguish between them, okay? But these, you're going to become very familiar with these particular laws. The first one, the Fair Labor Standards Act. They mentioned here, it sets minimum wage and maximum hours. It does a lot more than that. There are a lot of additional provisions of the Fair Labor Standards Act. It is enforced by the U.S. Department of Labor. And the U.S. Department of Labor will investigate companies that are suspected of violating the Fair Labor Standards Act. The crux of the Fair Labor Standards Act is to protect employees and make sure we've got fair labor standards. And we're going to go into detail about the Fair Labor Standards Act. You're going to learn more about this than you probably want to. The FLSA is the acronym. We will be using a lot of acronyms in this class as well. FLSA is your first one, Fair Labor Standards Act. Anything dealing with taxes, we love our acronyms. Okay. Next one, FICA. Those of you who received a paycheck are familiar with FICA. So who is this FICA and why are they taking all my money? FICA is the Federal Insurance Contributions Act, and it consists mainly of two taxes, Social Security tax and Medicare tax. Right? These are taxes that that earned income is subject to those taxes. And when I say earned income, I mean as opposed to other types of income that isn't earned. We have active income and we have passive income. If you are receiving interest from a savings account, you are not actively engaged in an activity to earn that money. Your money's just sitting there and essentially the bank is borrowing it and they're giving you some money in exchange for borrowing it. That's passive income. That's not earned income. So the FICA taxes only apply to earned income. You go to work, you earn that income, it's going to be subject to FICA. You work for yourself, you're self-employed. You're working for that income, it's going to be subject to FICA. Okay. Income tax withholding laws. We've got federal income tax withholding. We have state income tax withholding, and in some places there are local income taxes. Now we're lucky here in Iowa, we don't have any local income taxes. But there are places that mainly, well, in the East, there are, I know Michigan has local taxes. I have a friend who lives in Ohio. She's got Ohio state taxes. She's got she lives in Columbus. Well, actually, she works in Columbus. She lives just outside of Columbus. She has, because she works in Columbus, she's got City of Columbus income taxes. She has school district income taxes. She has, and then where she lives as well, they've got their own income tax, and then there are county income tax. It's silly. Yeah, I know. So there are, and you have to file a return for all of these. So when you think, most of us are familiar with filing our federal income tax return and our state income tax return here in Iowa. Those are the income tax returns, but there are places where there's a whole litany of income tax returns that have to be filed. New York City as well, they've got a city tax, income tax. Now we're subject to other taxes. Yeah.
What if some people is working online and then let's say I want to do something for another state, Florida.
Yes.
Then it also applies. So
it depends. There's this concept called nexus that has to be determined essentially where there are a lot of different factors. One of them is where is the work being done, does, what the base of operations, and we're actually going to talk about that topic in this class in a few chapters. But there are some complexities and there are a lot of questions that have to be asked to determine, okay, are you subject to Iowa taxes? Are you subject to Florida taxes? By the way, Florida doesn't have an income tax. State of Florida doesn't have one. There are, I think, 9 states now that do not have an income tax. Florida is one of them. But that's part of what we're going to look at further down in the semester. But yeah, so Iowa, like I said, we've got Iowa state tax, we've got federal taxes that we have to deal with. And we're talking about income taxes here. Taxes that are based on income. There are always 2 parts to any tax. There's the tax rate, which is, whatever percentage is going to be applied. And then there's the tax base, what you're applying that tax to. So we have income taxes. So the tax base in that case is the income, the level of income that is taxable. We've got property taxes. Tax base there is based, at least in the state of Iowa, is based on the value of the property. We've got sales taxes. Sales taxes, of course, the tax base there is the purchase price of whatever you bought. So in this class, what we're focusing on income taxes. So the amount of taxes that you pay related to the income that you earn. So like I said, when I say Iowa, we only have to deal with federal and state, that only pertains to the income taxes. We got other taxes that we pay. Unemployment taxes. So unemployment taxes help to fund the unemployment system, and there are two parts to the unemployment taxes. There's a federal part and there is a state part. And we're gonna talk in a lot more detail about how those two pieces work together for the unemployment. This is
Is that the FUTA?
FUTA, yep, FUTA and SUTA. So FUTA is Federal Unemployment Tax Act, what that stands for. SUTA, State Unemployment Tax Act. Okay, so these are, when we talk about unemployment tax, we're talking FUTA and SUTA, both of them. Essentially, this is the outline of the course. These are the chapters, the topics in the chapters that we're going to cover. Now, there's another one here that isn't mentioned, and that's the accounting part, where we're going to, once we've learned how to process payroll, how to calculate it, all the reports that need to be that need to be filled out and submitted, then we're going to learn how all of that information is used in the accounting system. That's the last. Whoops, sorry. Oh, going back. That's the last bullet point that they don't have on here. But chapter 1 is an overview of all of the different laws, including these, but we're going to go into detail on these in each chapter. So chapter 2, we're going to focus on that Fair Labor Standards Act. It pretty much gets its own chapter. Within chapter 2, we also learn how to calculate payroll. FICA is chapter 3. That's where we're going to learn how to calculate Social Security tax and Medicare tax, and what types of income are subject to those taxes, what types of income is exempt, in addition to that unearned income. There are other types of income that, even though it's earned, will be exempt from FICA. So there are some exceptions to what types of income are subject to that. But that's chapter 3. Chapter 4 is where we're going to get into the federal and state taxes. We're not going to do any local calculations because we don't need to in this state. But this is where we're going to do those, figure out how to withhold, how much to withhold at the federal level. And then chapter 5 is where we're going to focus on unemployment taxes, both FUTA and SUTA, and calculate those taxes and talk about the reporting on that is necessary there. And then, like I said, the last chapter, we're going to look at the accounting for it. Okay. In this chapter, we are going to, in addition, and we're, like I said, we're not going, this is the only chapter that we really talk about these other types of laws. We're going to go through some of what they call fair employment laws. So laws that are centered on anti-discrimination, making sure that employees are treated fairly, right? In the legal sense. So we're going to look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is a big piece of these fair employment laws. It also will help to inspire a lot of the future laws. Okay. So we'll look at some of the provisions of that. The Age Discrimination and Employment Act, and all of these, by the way, have their own acronyms. They didn't list them up here. Americans with Disabilities Act, plus many others. Okay, that's just kind of a little sampling. Other federal laws and other state laws. Oh, somebody's got a question, and I can't see them. Hold on just a second. Oops.
It's me, Julia.
Hello.
Hello. I just had a question about the laws that we were going to be going over. Are they specific to Iowa? I know it said other state laws as well, but for the employee laws? Is
So-
that specific to Iowa? We're going to be going over?
No, mainly the federal law that we're going to be talking about. Yeah.
Are we going to be going over the at will part, or specifically Iowa as well?
Yeah, we're not going to be. We don't cover that. No, because payroll. The payroll function isn't really. That would be more of a human resources responsibility than a payroll responsibility. And I know some of these kind of overlap, obviously, but no, the at-will employment, we're not going to be covering that. But you would find that in a human resources class. Any other questions? Okay. Let's see if there's a way that I can just show this on one screen. I can't see that. I just can't read it from that distance. I really don't want this on here. It's just not necessary. I guess that'll do. A little bit. Is it a little bit easier to? Okay. I'm not going to waste time trying to figure this out. Sorry. I trust everybody, all my virtual students can hear and see okay. Hopefully. Let me know if you can't.
Yes.
You can't. Okay. Cool. So the Fair Labor Standards Act, this is the granddaddy. The Fair Labor Standards Act, which like I said is enforced by the U.S. Department of Labor. It was passed in 1938. It's also known as the Federal Wage and Hour Law, but like I said, it also does a lot of other things as well. There are many other protections that are contained within this act. Child labor restrictions are one example. Certain working conditions as well. But its main function is to make sure that employees are being paid the minimum amount, at least the minimum wage, and to make sure when they talk about the hour law, they're talking about overtime. So hours over 40 hours a week for those individuals who are subject to the Fair Labor Standards Act. And you will find out, we'll talk about the fact not every employee gets these protections. Okay? There are certain employees that don't actually get, especially the wage and hour law protection. And we refer to those as exempt employees. They are exempt from the wage and hour provisions of the Fair Labor Standards Act. But it was passed in 1938. Think about what was going on in 1938. What was happening in 1938? Worldwide, here especially, the 1930s. Think back on your history. We were in the midst of a Great Depression, right? We were suffering from a very high unemployment rate. We also had, before that time, there really weren't any protections for individuals. Your employment, you mentioned at will, it was completely at will. There was no restriction on how much you had to be paid per hour. There was no requirement. Yeah.
What is at will?
At will, it refers to certain laws that essentially allow employers to fire you for pretty much any reason. There's more to it than that, but that's kind of the crux of it. So, so 1938, Great Depression, lots of high unemployment rate, lots of people living in poverty. There really, until this was passed, there was no minimum wage. You could have to work for 20 cents an hour or whatever it was at the time. There were no restrictions on hours as well. You didn't have to get paid additional for working over 40 hours in a week. The Fair Labor Standards Act changed that. So in addition, and you'll see a lot of these laws, they came about in the 30s. And it was a result of the Great Depression and deciding as a society that we did not want to allow this to happen again. That even if we did come into hard economic times, individuals, the federal government needed to do what it could to keep people out of poverty as much as possible. And so these laws were a result of that kind of change in thinking. Right now, minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Now, there aren't a whole lot of people that actually make the minimum wage. There are a few, but minimum wage, because of the economic factors right now, because there is still such high demand for workers, employers have been forced to increase those wages and increase them substantially in the last several years. You know, one of the reasons that we have inflation, not the only reason, but one of the reasons is because those wages have gone up. Employers, when wages go up and they pay more, they're going to pass that increased cost on to customers. So there aren't, the $7.25 an hour is the minimum, but it's becoming more and more rare to see positions that actually are paying only the minimum wage. But that is the minimum that has to be paid. Overtime, like I had mentioned, any hours over 40 hours in a work week for those employees who are subject to the provisions of the Fair Labor Standards Act, they're entitled to time and a half. We call it time and a half, which essentially means whatever their regular rate of pay is, you multiply it by 1.5, and all the hours that they work over 40 in that week, they get paid at that rate, right? So if they're making $10 an hour, but they work 41 hours, the first 40 hours are going to be paid at $10 an hour. But that extra hour will be paid at $15 an hour because that's 1.5 times their regular rate of pay. So that's what the Fair Labor Standards Act does. Some of the other things that it does is there are equal pay provisions. So there are provisions within the act that guarantee that two individuals, same background, same experience, you know, one's a male, one's female, they're going to get paid the same amount. So there are some equal pay protections within the Fair Labor Standards Act. Now, obviously, those equal pay protections weren't enough, because if they were enough, we wouldn't have needed additional protections with the Civil Rights Act and other laws that came after this. But it does, there is a provision in there for equal pay, for equal work. So the employers who are subject to these restrictions are employers who are engaged in interstate commerce or in the production of goods and services for interstate commerce. Now, what the heck is interstate commerce? Interstate means it's between more than one state. So, for example, you purchase your example of Florida and Iowa. Even if it's an employee who's living in Iowa, but it's a company that's in Florida, that's interstate commerce. They've engaged in interstate commerce. It's very difficult these days to not engage in interstate commerce, because even sending an email out of state is engaging in interstate commerce. Making purchases from a company that's outside of your state, you know, if you're purchasing inventory, that's interstate commerce.
Is that the use tax?
I'm sorry? The use test?
Tax. US.
Oh, the use tax. No, I know what you're talking about. The use tax is if you have purchased something and you didn't pay sales tax on it, then the person who purchased it, you're responsible for paying what would have been the sales tax. So, and that was much more common before, you know, a few years ago when you bought something online, and like say from Amazon, because Amazon didn't really have a physical presence in Iowa, you didn't have to pay sales tax. So, well, you didn't have to pay it to Amazon, but you were still, as a consumer, required to pay sales tax. So that's where the use tax came in. So instead of paying that sales tax to Amazon, you were supposed to report the sale yourself on your personal income tax return. That's where the reporting was done, and pay that then to the state in that way. Now, how many people are actually going to do that? You know,
How many people know
yeah,
about doing that?
exactly. So now, though, those interstate, those companies, even if there isn't a physical presence, although Amazon has a physical presence in pretty much every state now, but even if there isn't a physical presence now, they do have to collect sales tax and remit it. Yeah. So that's where use tax. That's what use tax is. It was the sales tax that wasn't paid up front.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so not all companies, and there are some mom and pop stores and companies that might be exempt from the FLSA, but in reality, most companies are going to be subject to the FLSA. Minimum wage for covered employees, and again, we're going to go through this in a lot more detail in Chapter 2, the FLSA. FICA. Okay, so the Federal Insurance Contributions Act, like I had mentioned, it consists of two taxes, Social Security and Medicare. Now you see here, the word Social Security isn't up there anywhere. Social Security goes by a couple of different names. We call it Social Security because it's much shorter than saying the Federal Old Age and Survivors Trust Fund and the Disability Insurance Trust Fund. It's a lot shorter than saying all that. But OASDI is also known as Social Security. What's that?
The nickname.
The acronym. Yep. Yep. There's another acronym right there. But what that OASDI stands for is Old Age and Survivors Trust Fund, Federal Old Age Survivors Disability Insurance is what it's called.
Do I have to remember all of that?
If you remember OASDI, you're probably all right, but you want to know what it does. Yeah, and this is, a lot of people don't realize everything that Social Security provides. We think of it as just retirement benefits, right? It's not just retirement benefits. If an individual passes away and they would have been entitled to receive Social Security benefits when they retired, if they have dependent children, those dependent children now are entitled to survivor's benefits. They get a monthly check until they're 18 or 19 and graduate from high school. So if they're still in high school at age 19, they can still receive it. That's to help. And also for if there was a spouse that did not remarry and has those dependent children, they also would receive benefits based upon what the deceased individual should have received when they retire. So it provides survivors benefits, so a type of insurance, kind of a type of life insurance policy, and then also disability insurance is what it provides. So if you become permanently and totally disabled, you could be entitled to payments every month from the Social Security Fund, disability. They call it SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. But that is another piece of Social Security. So it's really got three big provisions to it, not just the retirement fund. It does, though, the biggest part is providing benefits in retirement, okay? And it doesn't, but it's not, the benefits themselves are not related to need. So Donald Trump is receiving Social Security benefits. I mean, there's no income limitation on receiving those Social Security benefits. The purpose behind it is to ensure that the elderly don't fall into poverty, that they receive at least a minimum amount so that they can pay their bills. But everybody who pays into the system, once they meet the requirements to receive benefits, they get those benefits regardless of whether they need them or not.
So this starts after you're retired.
After you're retired, yes. Everybody has their own, depending upon when you were born, you have a retirement age. looking at all of you, I can tell your retirement age currently is 67 years old. That's the oldest. Now, your grandparents would fall into the category of individuals who would get their benefits at age 65, and then kind of the in-between would be at 66. But they've slowly raised that age. They may continue to raise it. Social Security has a lot, they keep threatening that it's going to. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that male or female? Because I know my mom, her retirement is at 66, but my dad's at 65 because he's a male.
It's not gender. It's not gender specific. It has to do with when you were born, and you can choose though not to take it at your retirement age. So you can choose to wait to take it, and what that does is it increases your benefit once it's paid out. So, but it's not. And now there are provisions for. And I'm not an expert on Social Security benefits, but there are provisions within Social Security where you can receive half of your spouse's Social Security benefits if it's more than what your Social Security benefits would have been. So I don't know if that's, but it's not gender specific as far as whether they're male or female. It has to do with age. So what we're going to focus on here is the taxes that go into that program, and Medicare. I'll talk about Medicare here in just a second. We're interested in the tax part, the amount that's actually paid into the system, because obviously we've got amounts that are benefits that are being paid out. That money's got to come from somewhere. It comes from you guys and me when we work. Okay, so the amounts that are being withheld from paychecks or paid by self-employed individuals or OASDI or Medicare, those are the amounts that currently are being paid out to beneficiaries. Okay, so it's not like a savings account where, I put in, $300,000 in Social Security benefits through my lifetime, and so now I get $300,000 back. It's not how that works. It's more like a traditional pension where it has to do with how much you've earned and how long you've been working, and it's an actuarial calculation that occurs. The other part then of FICA is Medicare. So Medicare tax, again, is mainly for the elderly. I hate to call people 65 and older elderly because they're not elderly. But that's when Medicare can kick in. So it's health insurance that is provided to retirees, essentially. Hi.
This is English class, right?
No, not yet. We're still in class. About 5 minutes.
Oh.
Okay. So Medicare it's health insurance coverage for retirees. A lot of people get their health insurance through their employer, and the assumption is that, once you are retired, you're not going to get that anymore. So Medicare kicks in and provides those benefits. Both of these taxes are shared by employers and employees. Each of them pays half. So when you are receiving your paycheck and you see how much FICA has been taken out, and I encourage you, next time you get a paycheck, people don't get checks anymore, direct deposit. But if you have access to your stub, take a look at the FICA. Take a look at the OASDI and the Medicare part, and how much was taken out. You can do the calculation. I'm not going to tell you what the tax rate is right now, but you can do the calculation and figure out what it is. The amount that you pay, your employer has paid an equal amount. So if you had $100 withheld, you actually have $200 going into being credited toward your account for Social Security. So it's an additional cost that a lot of employees aren't aware of that their employers do pay. So it's not just their hourly wage, it's going to be their hourly wage plus, at a minimum, the employer's portion of Social Security and Medicare tax. Okay. And then, like I mentioned, I keep saying if you're also self-employed. So self-employed individuals, they are they don't really have an employer, do they, to share in that half of the taxes. So they get the privilege of paying both halves, self-employed individuals. That's also something that a lot of people who become self-employed for the first time don't realize. And that could be kind of a hefty tax hit for people. But it is because it's earned income, it is subject to the Social Security and Medicare taxes, those FICA taxes. Chapter 3 is where we're going to focus on Social Security or FICA. Let's see, real quick here. Income tax withholding. So we've got federal income tax law and we've got state. And like I said, we don't have a local income tax here in Iowa. There are, I think it's 9 states. If you want to go out and research it, it's an easy Google search. How many states don't have state taxes? I don't know that I can name all of them, but I know Washington State doesn't have one. Let's see, South Dakota, Texas, Florida, New Hampshire. I can't think of the others off the top of my head. But if you want to go out and look them up, see what states don't have income taxes. Obviously, state income tax law is going to be handled at the state level. State legislatures and governors will put those together. Federal income tax is U.S. Congress passes tax law. They pass tax law and they look at it at kind of the 30,000 foot level, so they don't get into the details of it. They just say, hey, we're gonna have a child tax credit. Now we're gonna increase the child tax credit. They let the IRS figure out how that's going to be done. Okay, so the IRS doesn't make the laws. The IRS has no responsibility for making them. They have responsibility for interpreting them and for enforcing them. And then when there's a disagreement between a taxpayer and the IRS, sometimes that will go to court, and the courts will decide, if that interpretation was correct or not. And believe it or not, the IRS is wrong. They can be wrong. They absolutely can be wrong. Chapter 4, we're going to look at these. We've got a couple of different methods that we're going to look at. Percentage and wage bracket method. Don't get too worried about that right now. You'll get plenty of that when we go to chapter 4. Unemployment tax. So again, there is a federal unemployment tax and there is a state unemployment tax. The federal part is used to pay administrative expenses for the program, so it doesn't actually pay benefits directly. The state portion is what pays out the benefits. And in chapter 5 is when we're gonna focus on that. So don't worry too much about the details there as well. Student. What's the minimum wage?
7.5.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I just want to get to. Okay. So that's a good place to end, talking about what we actually cover in detail in the textbook. When we come back on Tuesday, we're going to start looking at some of these fair employment laws. Okay. So if you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully you can all get on to Cengage. I know you don't have, for those of you who like to have a physical textbook, I know it's kind of a pain. It's available, but it's not cheap.
Can we print as we go?
Well, usually you can, and actually Cengage has a pretty good deal on rentals. They only charge you the shipping and handling. They even let you write in it. And we were on another student and she was talking to Cengage this morning. They said that because it's a brand new textbook that they don't have rentals. So I'm communicating with the bookstore to see if there's any way around that, because that is kind of all right. Okay, so everybody out there, let me see. Oh, good, I'm still on. Have a great weekend. Yeah, it's almost a weekend. To think of what day it is. And yeah, Julia, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that I was part of the attendance. I know it was a little late today, but
Yeah.
I'm here.
Okay, excellent. I will mark you down as here. Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to play around with this and see if I can't get the audio to work better, because we could hear you, but it was not perfect.
Was I quiet or?
It's just the speaker here. Like we have speakers in the ceilings that we should be able to get audio through, which makes it easy to hear you guys. But I couldn't get that hooked up properly anyway. And it's probably my fault. So I was using the speaker that's just in the monitor. So it's kind of tinny. Bye. Have a good weekend. Let's see. So you guys are welcome to go. You don't have to hang around and watch me.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. Bye.